Welcome to Story Medicine. I'm Joe Summerfield. For over 20 years, I've been working to better understand and support people in navigating this human experience. I've come to believe that stories are encoded with the collective wisdom of all who have come before us, and that they bring us into connection with the collective unconscious and contain treasure waiting to be decoded. This podcast explores traditional tales through that lens. Each episode offers a story told in full, an exploration of the medicine it may carry, and practices to help you integrate that medicine. Today's story comes from the Grimm Brothers collection, drawn from German oral tradition. It's called Iron John. This tale carries profound medicine about masculine development, initiation, and the journey from boyhood to manhood. A journey that speaks to all of us and has touched all of us, regardless of our own gender. So let's begin. Part 1. The Story. Once upon a time, there was a king whose castle stood near a great forest, and in that forest something had gone terribly wrong. Hunters who ventured into its depths never returned. One hunter disappeared, and then 2 more were sent to find him, and then all the royal huntsmen who went searching, all disappeared. Even the hounds vanished without trace. For years, nobody dared to enter. The forest lay in deep stillness and solitude, touched only by the shadow of eagles circling overhead. Then, one day, a foreign huntsman arrived seeking work. "I will go into the dangerous forest," he told the king. "It's not safe," the king warned. "You will fare no better than the others." "I will venture at my own risk," said the huntsman. "I know nothing of fear." He entered the forest with his dog, and before long the dog had caught a scent and ran towards a deep, dark pool. At the water's edge, the dog suddenly stopped, and a naked arm reached up from the depths and pulled the dog under. The huntsman hurried back to the castle and returned with 3 men carrying buckets. They bailed the water out of the dark pool bucket by bucket until they could see the bottom. And there, at the bottom of the pool, lay a wild man. His body was brown like rusty iron, and his hair hung over his face down to his knees. They bound him with cords and led him back to the castle, where everybody gathered in amazement. The king had him locked in an iron cage in the courtyard, forbidding anybody to open it on pain of death. He gave the key to the queen herself for safekeeping. From that day forward, everyone could once again walk in safety in the forest. The king had a son, 8 years old, who loved to play in the courtyard. And one day, while playing with his golden ball, his most treasured possession, he threw it high into the air. It bounced once, it bounced twice, and it rolled directly into the wild man's cage. The boy ran over to the bars. "Give me my ball back." The wild man looked at him with ancient eyes. "Not until you open the door for me." "No," said the boy, "I cannot. The king has forbidden it." And he ran away. The next day he returned and once again asked for his ball, and the wild man said, "Open my door." But the boy would not. On the 3rd day, when the king had ridden out hunting, the boy came back once more. "Please," he said, "I want my ball back." "The key lies under your mother's pillow," said the wild man. "You can get it from there." The boy hesitated. He wanted his golden ball so desperately that he cast all caution aside. He crept into his mother's chamber and took the key from beneath her pillow. His hands trembled as he fitted the key into the lock. It was stiff and hard to turn, and as he struggled with it, the door suddenly opened, and he pinched his finger. It hurt terribly and began to bleed. The wild man stepped out of the cage and handed the boy his golden ball. Then he turned to go. Fear flooded through the boy. "Wait!" he cried. "Don't leave me! When my father comes home, he'll be angry and I'll be beaten." The wild man turned back to look at him with something like compassion. "You freed me, and I will not abandon you. Climb onto my shoulders." The boy climbed up, and the wild man carried him swiftly into the forest, moving through the trees and the undergrowth until they reached a place far away from any human dwelling. When they stopped, the wild man set the boy down. "You will never see your father and mother again," he said, "but I will keep you with me, for you set me free, and I have compassion for you. If you do all that I ask, you shall fare well. I have treasure and gold in abundance, more than anyone in the world." He made a bed of moss where the boy slept. The next morning he led him to a spring of water so clear and bright that it seemed to shine like crystal. "Sit beside the spring," said the wild man, "and you watch over it carefully. Make sure nothing falls into it, or it will be polluted. I will come every evening to see if you've kept watch faithfully." The boy sat by the spring. He saw golden fish swimming in its depths and golden snakes showing themselves, and he watched carefully. But as he sat there, his wounded finger, the one that he'd pinched in the lock, began to hurt terribly, and without thinking, he dipped it into the water to ease the pain. He pulled it out quickly, but it was too late. The fingertip had turned to gold. When the wild man returned that evening, he looked at the boy and said, "What has happened to the spring?" "Nothing," said the boy, hiding his hand behind his back. But the wild man saw through the deception as easily as seeing through water. "You have dipped your finger in it. This time I will overlook it, but you take care not to let anything else fall in." The next morning the boy sat by the spring again, determined to be more careful this time. His finger still hurt, and without thinking about it, he passed his hand over his head to ease his pain, and as he did, a single hair came loose and fell into the water. He snatched it out immediately, but when he looked, the strand had turned to gold, shining like a thread of sunlight. When the wild man returned, he already knew what had happened. "You have let hair fall into the spring. I will allow you to watch it one more time, but if it happens a third time, the spring will be polluted, and you can no longer stay with me." On the third day the boy sat perfectly still. He did not move his wounded finger, no matter how much it hurt. But the hours were long, and he grew restless. He leaned forwards to look at his reflection in the clear water, bending closer and closer, trying to look straight into his own eyes. And as he did, his long hair fell from his shoulders into the spring. He jerked back, but every strand on his head had turned to gold, glowing like the sun itself. The boy was terrified. He took his handkerchief and tied it around his head to hide what had happened, but when the wild man returned, he already knew everything. "Take off the handkerchief," he said. The boy removed it, and his golden hair streamed free. He tried to explain, to excuse himself, but the wild man shook his head. "You have not passed the trial. You cannot stay here any longer. You go out into the world and learn what poverty means. But you have a good heart, and I mean you well. If you ever fall into any difficulty, come back to the forest and call my name, Iron John, and I will come to help you. My power is great, greater than you know." And so the boy left the forest. He walked by roads and paths until he reached a great city where he sought work, but he could find none. Eventually he came to the royal palace, and he asked if they would take him in. The people at court didn't know what use to make of him, but they liked something about him and told him to stay. The cook finally said, "You can carry the wood and water and rake the cinders." One day, when no one else was available, Cook ordered him to carry food to the royal table. The boy kept his cap on, not wanting his golden hair to be seen. When the king noticed, he said sharply, "When you come to the royal table, you must take off your hat." "I cannot, my lord," said the boy. "I have a sore on my head." The king was displeased, and he had the cook called before him. "How could you bring such an ill-mannered boy into my presence? Send him away." But the cook took pity on the boy and arranged for him to work in the garden instead. Now the boy spent his days planting and watering, hoeing and digging, bearing the wind and the weather. He kept his cap pulled low over his golden hair. One summer day, while working in the garden, the heat grew so strong that he took off his cap to let the air cool him, and the sun caught his hair, and it glittered and flashed so brightly that the rays fell into the bedroom of the king's daughter. She sprang up to see what it could be that shined so brilliantly. Looking out, she saw the gardener's boy below. "Boy," she called, "bring me a bouquet of flowers." He put his cap back on hastily and gathered the wildflowers from the hedges, binding them up together. He climbed the stairs and presented them to her, and a gust of wind caught his cap and blew it off. His golden hair tumbled free, shining in the sunlight. The princess had never seen anything like it. "Where did you get such hair?" she asked, amazed. But the boy only bowed, picked up his cap, and hurried away without answering. The next day she called to him again for flowers, and again he brought them, and she tried to snatch his cap away, but he held it fast. She gave him a handful of gold coins, but he took them straight to the gardener's children as playthings. On the third day, the same thing happened. She could not get his cap away, and he would not keep her money. Time passed, and then war came to the kingdom. The king gathered his army, but the enemy was strong, stronger than his forces, and victory seemed uncertain. The gardener's boy came forwards. "I am grown now," he said. "Let me go to war. Just give me a horse." The others laughed. "Find one yourself when we're gone. We'll leave you one in the stable." When the army had departed, the boy went to the stable and found what they had left him, a lame horse that could barely walk. He mounted it anyway and rode toward the forest. At the forest's edge, he called out 3 times, so loudly that his voice echoed through the trees. "Iron John! Iron John! Iron John!" The wild man appeared immediately. "What do you need?" "I need a strong horse for war and armor." "You shall have that, and more than you ask for." Iron John went back into the forest, and before long a stable boy emerged, leading a magnificent horse that snorted and could hardly be restrained. Behind came a great troop of soldiers in iron armor, their swords flashing in the sun. The boy's armor was as red as fire, and his horse was chestnut brown and powerful. The boy left his lame horse with the stable boy, mounted his war horse, and rode at the head of the iron soldiers. When he reached the battlefield, many of the king's men had already fallen. The boy galloped forward with his iron army and broke over the enemy like a storm, beating down all who opposed him. The enemy began to flee, but instead of returning to the king, the boy led his troops back to the forest by hidden paths. He returned everything to Iron John, the horse, the armor, the soldiers, and then rode home on his lame horse. When the king returned to his palace, his daughter came to meet him. "I congratulate you on your victory, father." "I did not win," said the king. "A strange knight came with an army and saved us. He fought magnificently and then disappeared before I could thank him or even learn his name." The daughter asked the gardener where his boy had been, and the gardener laughed. "He just came home on his 3-legged horse. The others have been mocking him, shouting, 'Here comes our hobbledy-jig,' and asking where he's been sleeping under the edges." War came again. Again, the boy called for Iron John, and this time he was given white armor and a white horse, and soldiers dressed in white. Again he saved the kingdom and vanished. A third time war threatened, and this time the boy received black armor and a black horse, and once more he turned the tide of the battle and rode away victorious. After this third victory, the king said to his daughter, "I will proclaim a great feast lasting 3 days. You shall throw a golden apple, and perhaps the unknown knight will come." When the feast was announced, the boy went into the forest and called for Iron John. "What do you need?" asked Iron John. "I want to catch the king's daughter's golden apple." "It is as good as yours already," said Iron John. "And you shall have red armor and ride a spirited chestnut horse." When the day came, the boy galloped to the tournament and took his place amongst the knights. Nobody recognized him. The king's daughter came forward and threw a golden apple high into the air, and the boy caught it cleanly. But as soon as it was in his hand, he galloped away. On the second day, Iron John gave him white armor and a white horse. Again, he was the only one to catch the apple, and again he galloped off immediately. The king grew angry. "This is not permitted. He must appear before me and tell me his name." He gave orders that if the knight caught the apple and then tried to leave, the guards should pursue him. If he would not return willingly, they were to wound him. On the third day, the boy wore black armor and rode a black horse. Once more, he caught the golden apple, but as he galloped away, the king's guards pursued him. One got close enough to wound him on the arm with his spear, but the boy escaped, and in his haste and pain, his helmet fell from his head. His golden hair streamed out behind him, shining like the sun itself. The guards rode back to tell the king, "The mysterious knight has golden hair." The following day, the boy returned to the gardener's house. The gardener's wife saw blood on his shirt and grew suspicious. "Where have you been?" she asked. "What's happened to you?" But the boy said nothing and went about his work. The next day, the king summoned his gardener. "Where's your boy?" "He's working in the garden, my lord. The strange fellow was at the festival too. He showed my children the 3 golden apples he said he won." "Bring him to me," commanded the king. The boy came, still wearing his old cap, but the king's daughter walked straight up to him and pulled the cap from his head. His golden hair fell free, shining so brightly that everybody gasped. "You are the one," said the king's daughter softly. "You saved our kingdom 3 times." "I'm only the gardener's boy," he said. "Then show us your arm," said the king. The boy pulled back his sleeve. And there was the fresh wound from the spear, still bandaged. The king looked at him carefully. "Who are you, really? Tell me the truth." The boy stood tall. "My father is a mighty king, and I have gold in plenty, more than I require." "Then you are no gardener's boy," said the king. "Can I do anything to please you?" "Yes," said the boy. "Give me your daughter as my wife." The princess laughed with joy. "He does not stand on ceremony, but I've already seen by his golden hair that he was no gardener's boy." And she went to him and kissed him. His father and mother were sent for, and they came to the wedding in great delight, for they had given up all hope of ever seeing their dear son again. And as they sat at the marriage feast, the music suddenly stopped. The doors opened, and a stately king entered with a great retinue. He walked straight to the young man, embraced him, and he said, "I am Iron John. I was held by enchantment as a wild man, but you set me free, and all the treasures I possess are now yours." The young man who had once been only a boy with a golden ball had become a man who knew both wilderness and cultivation, both poverty and abundance, both service and sovereignty. Part 2. The Medicine. Let's explore the medicine that this story may carry. On the surface, this is a tale about a boy who frees a wild man, learns through trials and service, proves himself in battle, and wins the princess. But like all stories that survive centuries, it works on deeper levels, offering medicine where we desperately need it. The wild man in the pool. Notice how the story begins. Something is wrong in the forest. Hunters disappear. Even the hounds vanish. The forest, which in these old tales represents the unconscious, that vast inner territory that we haven't explored, has become dangerous. The wild man lies submerged at the bottom of a dark pool, his body brown like rusty iron. This is the instinctual, earthy, masculine energy that's been pushed down, buried beneath the surface of conscious, civilized life. Jung would call this the aspect of the self that's been exiled from awareness. The wild man isn't evil. He's been submerged. And notice what happens when he's captured and caged. The forest becomes safe again. When we lock away our wildness, our instinctual nature, our fierceness, our untamed energy, things become orderly and predictable. But something essential is lost. We can see this pattern occurring often. The wild instinctual parts get deemed too dangerous for civilized life and get pushed down, caged. We learn early in our lives that certain kinds of energy must be controlled or hidden. But we cannot become whole while keeping parts of ourselves locked away. The golden ball and the wound. The king's son is 8 years old, right at that threshold between early childhood and something more. He's playing with his golden ball, his most treasured possession. In alchemical symbolism, gold represents what's most precious, and the sphere represents wholeness, totality. This ball is the boy's sense of himself as complete, and he loses it. It rolls into the cage. Here's the pattern. Healthy development requires that at some point we lose our sense of wholeness. We discover that what we thought was complete is actually incomplete. Something essential is missing, and that something is locked away with what we've caged. The wild man says, "You can have your wholeness back, but only if you free me." Now watch what happens when the boy turns the key. He pinches his finger. It hurts and it begins to bleed, and this wound is crucial. The initiation into maturity requires some wounding. Some part of us gets hurt in the very act of freeing what's been caged. And that wound, it will become gold. But first, it just hurts. The key under the mother's pillow. The key to the cage is under the mother's pillow, in her most intimate private space. The boy must take it, but he cannot ask permission. No one will give him permission to become wild and dangerous. Robert Bly, who popularized this story in men's work in the 1990s, saw this clearly. In our culture, mothers often hold the keys to masculine wildness because fathers have been absent or distant. But I would add, it's not just mothers. The king gave the key to the queen for safekeeping. Civilized society itself, not just mothers, wants to keep wildness locked safely away. The boy must choose to take the key, and there will be consequences. He knows his father will be angry, but he takes it anyway, because without it, he cannot retrieve his wholeness. This speaks to something that we've largely lost. The recognition that becoming yourself requires taking what you need without waiting for permission. Not with rebellion or with hatred, but with necessity. Leaving home. When the cage opens, the boy realizes he cannot go back. His old life cannot continue once he's freed the wild. So he climbs onto Iron John's shoulders and disappears into the forest, into the unknown, away from the castle, beyond his parents' world. In therapeutic work, I meet people in their 30s or 40s or even 50s who are still trying to win their parents' approval for choices that their parents cannot understand. Still living under the castle rules. The story says clearly, you must leave, not forever necessarily, but for a time. You must go into territory where the old rules do not reach. The 3 failures at the spring. Iron John takes the boy to a pure spring and gives him a task. Watch over this. Make sure nothing contaminates it. This is interesting. The wild man doesn't immediately teach wildness. He teaches attention, care, vigilance, integrity. He's testing whether the boy can maintain purity, hold boundaries, and stay watchful. But the boy fails 3 times. His wounded finger touches the water, gold. His hair touches the water, gold. His whole head of hair touches the water, all gold. Some people read this as failure, but I see transformation. The boy is young, human, imperfect. He gets tired, he feels pain, he loses focus, and each time he fails, more of him turns to gold. The wound becomes gold. The weakness becomes precious. Perhaps it isn't failure at all. Perhaps this is how transformation works. Through our very inability to maintain perfect vigilance, Something valuable emerges. So Iron John sends him into the world to learn what poverty means. The boy must now discover what it's like to have nothing, to be nobody, to start from the bottom. The 3 stages of service. The boy, now marked with golden hair that must be hidden, enters service. He's refused at the kitchen, but accepted in the garden, and he works hard, humble labour that nobody sees. This is essential medicine. You cannot skip the stages of service. You cannot claim your specialness, your golden nature, before you've learnt what it means to work at the bottom, to be overlooked, to do difficult tasks when nobody's watching. The princess keeps seeing his golden hair when the wind blows his cap off. Feminine wisdom recognizes what's trying to emerge even before we're ready to claim it ourselves. 3 times she sees. 3 times she gives him gold coins. 3 times he gives them away. He's not ready yet to receive that recognition or reward. He's still learning, still serving, and still becoming. The 3 battles. When war comes, the boy finally calls on Iron John. He doesn't fight alone. Iron John gives him a magnificent horse, armour, and an entire army of iron soldiers. The wild masculine, when properly related to, provides support. You don't have to face the battle by yourself. This goes against so much of the conditioning that says that real men handle everything alone. The story says, call for help from your wildness, and an army will come. 3 times he rides out. Red armour, white armour, black armour. These are alchemical stages. Passion, purification, integration. Each time he's magnificent. Each time he saves the kingdom. Each time he returns everything to Iron John and goes back into humble service. He is not yet ready to claim his prize. He's practicing, learning, becoming. The masculine path requires that you prove yourself not for praise, but for the work itself. The golden apples and recognition. Finally, the tournament. The king wants to discover who saved them. The princess has 3 golden apples to give the finest warriors. 3 days, 3 apples, 3 colours of armour. The boy catches each apple, but only on the 3rd day, when he's pursued and wounded again, this time in the arm with a spear, does his helmet fall off. His golden hair is finally seen by everyone. The gardener's wife sees the blood on the shirt and grows suspicious. Something has happened. The boy cannot hide anymore. The next day, when the king summons the gardener's boy, the princess walks up and takes off his cap. The golden hair shines for all to see. He shows his wound, he reveals the 3 golden apples, and he tells the truth about who he is. This is the moment of claiming. After the service, after the battles, after the trials, only now is he ready to stand in his full identity, without it inflating him, without it destroying his capacity for humility. The transformation of Iron John. And then, possibly the deepest medicine. Iron John was never just a wild man. He was a king under enchantment, waiting for somebody pure of heart to free him. The wild masculine isn't ultimately separate from the noble masculine. The instinctual and the sovereign are meant to be integrated. When you can hold the wild and learn from it, it doesn't make you uncivilized, it makes you whole. The boy hadn't been orphaned, he'd been learning. And now he returns, not as a lost child, but as a man who knows both wildness and civilization, both poverty and abundance, both service and sovereignty. This story speaks to anybody navigating masculine development, and I want to be clear, this isn't only about men. Women do carry masculine energy too. These patterns of freeing the instinctual, learning through service, proving yourself through ordeal, integrating wildness with cultivation, they apply to all of us. In our current time, I see people who are all garden and no wildness, overly contained, terrified of their own power, unable to take up space. And I see people who are all wildness and no garden, raw energy with no cultivation, no patience, no capacity for service or nuance. The medicine this story offers is that both are necessary. You need the wild, you need the cultivated. You need to be able to fight fiercely when it matters and tend roses with patience. You need Iron John's power and the discipline to sit by the spring. You need to serve humbly and ride into battle courageously. And you need to be wounded. The wound at the beginning, the bloody finger when he turns the key, becomes gold. The wound at the end, the arm injury that reveals him, that becomes a mark of recognition. Without the wounds, there is no transformation. The gift of this pattern. This story provides a map, not a prescription, but a map. It shows that becoming yourself isn't about becoming hard or invulnerable. It's about freeing what's been caged, even though it costs you. Learning through humble service before claiming your place. Calling on your wildness when battles come. Allowing wounds to become wisdom. And eventually integrating it all. Wild and tame, fierce and gentle, golden and bloody, sovereign and servant. The boy starts with the golden ball and loses it. The man returns with golden hair, himself transformed into gold through his trials, his service, his wounds, and his willingness to learn. That's the journey. That's the medicine. Part 3. Integration Practices. Here are 3 practices that may help you integrate some of this story's medicine. First practice. What have you caged? Take 20 minutes with your journal. Draw a line down the center of the page, creating 2 columns. On the left, write, what have I caged? The list of qualities or energies or ways of being that you've locked away because they seemed too dangerous or too wild or too much for civilized life, for school, for your home, whatever it might have been. Perhaps it's anger or grief. Perhaps it's ambition or playfulness or fierceness. Perhaps it's softness, the capacity to weep, or the desire to be vulnerable. Perhaps it's your voice. Don't judge what appears, just list it honestly. On the right, write, what has it cost? For each thing that you've caged, notice what you've lost by caging it. What's become impossible or difficult? What could you not reach or grasp or create or claim? What part of your wholeness is locked away with that caged energy? This practice serves the story's teaching that we cannot become whole until we see clearly what we've submerged in our own dark pool in our forest. Second practice, taking the key. In the story, the boy waits 3 days, but eventually he must take the key for himself. Where in your life are you waiting for permission to be more fully yourself? Who or what are you tied to that is holding you back? This week, identify one specific situation where you've been holding yourself back, waiting to be allowed. Perhaps it's in your work, where you've been concealing your real capacity or ideas. Perhaps it's in your relationships, where you've been making yourself smaller to remain acceptable. Perhaps it's in your creative life, in your body, in your voice. Choose one area, and then, without asking permission, take the key. Do the thing that you've been waiting to be allowed to do. Speak the truth. Take up the space. Make the ask. Show the work. Be the size that you actually are. This may be painful or challenging, and the story tells us clearly, when you turn that key, you will pinch your finger. Something will hurt. That's not failure, it's part of the initiation. Notice what hurts, and notice what you gain. The wound will become gold, but at first it may be just a wound. This practice serves the story's teaching that becoming yourself requires taking what you need without waiting for someone to give you permission. The third practice, showing your gold. The boy hides his golden hair under a cap through most of the story. What are you hiding under a cap? What gift or capacity or quality do you possess that you've learnt to keep covered? This practice has 2 parts. First, name it privately. Complete this sentence in your journal. My golden hair is. This might be your intelligence, your creative vision, your grief, your joy, your leadership capacity, your wildness itself, your tenderness. Name what you've been taught to hide. And second, and this may be the harder part, choose a safe person or one safe situation where you will let the wind blow off your cap. Let your gold show, not in a performance, but in a genuine revelation. Tell somebody about your real ambition. Share your creative work. Let your joy be visible. Give your anger its voice. Express your tenderness without apologizing. Wherever your golden hair is, let it shine in front of one person who might be able to see it, and notice what happens. The story tells us the princess recognizes the gold immediately. Certain people can see what's valuable in you even when you're trying to hide it, or even when you may not see it. Finding those people and letting yourself be seen by them is part of the path. This practice serves the story's teaching that you cannot claim your place until you're willing to be seen for what you truly are. The medicine doesn't come from understanding these patterns intellectually. It comes from the practices, from allowing the transformation to happen in your body, in your choices, in your honest acknowledgement of where you are and what you've caged. The boy became a man through his trials, his wounds, his service, and his willingness to show his gold when the time came. Your path will be different in its details, but similar in its pattern. Iron John is waiting in your forest. The question is whether you're ready to take the key, bear the wound, and make the journey. The wisdom in these old stories waits patiently. I hope this one's medicine found you where you need it. Thank you for listening to Story Medicine. I am Joe Summerfield. Until next time.